Hello, we are live. It is myself and Mr. Adrian Beasley. Adrian, how you doing?
Hi. Yeah, good. How are you, Sam?
I'm very good. I'm very good. We were joking that the band are back together. Anyone who watched all our sessions during lockdown, you'll be familiar with me, obviously. But Adrian, you were my host, my co-host, technical expert on all of those as well. So it's nice to be back together.
It was good. Yeah, I'd sort of forgotten about them, and then it all sort of came flooding back, and yeah, we had a
When you
good
saw
fun.
my face.
Yep, yeah. You just
This
remind me.
is
I normally have a pint.
Yeah, and obviously a global pandemic, but this is literally the only time we ever see each other. So, we
Yes,
our friendship exists solely on live streams. It's a
that's
bit
it.
weird.
Yes, yes.
But no, it's good. It's good to be back. And for everyone joining along tonight, welcome back if you've joined us before, which I'm sure many of you have. We're going to be doing a session with Adrian tonight. So it's the usual sort of layout when we have a guest, which basically means we're using 4 or 5 of the workshops, tours, locations that Adrian goes on and hosts. And we're using those as a sort of basis to talk about photography more broadly. There will be a fair focus on black and white, but we've got a good amount of colour in tonight as well. And also, we'll be discussing a little bit of we'll be discussing a little bit of mobile phones, cameras, and maybe the blur between the lines there, shall we
Mm,
say? And I suppose on that point, Adrian,
mm.
we were saying that, or we were saying just before we came on air, you don't necessarily, how do I put it? You don't differentiate per se
No,
between using them now, do you? It's all one process.
it is. Yeah, all my pictures come into the same folder system, whether they come from the phone or from my camera cards. They're. I don't separate them out. They're just pictures. And more often than not, I'll be working on a picture and I'll realize, maybe only part way through that it's a phone shot. Sometimes it's quite surprising.
Mm,
So I've been able to do big prints, A1 prints with the phone shots, with a single shot. I've
wow.
done large panoramas, kind of 1.5 meter panoramas with phone shots, and honestly, I think you would struggle to spot them from my other cameras. So why separate them?
Yeah,
Just they're cameras. So you wouldn't separate your other cameras apart. So why would you separate the phone images?
yeah. And so we'll maybe touch on that a bit more as we go through the evening. As I say, um, we're gonna touch on a few different locations: London, Prague,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
beautiful parts of Devon as well, where Adrian
Mm.
resides nearby normally and is very au fait with that part of the world. So as I say, we're going to touch on those. We're going to use the images from those places to kind of cover all manner of things photographic. So I'm just doing my little preamble because I know people are joining on, and I can see a good number of you here already, which is fantastic. If you are with us and you're logged in on YouTube, you've got an account, or if you're here on Facebook, you can watch us on either. Ken he's still on the Isle of Sheppey. Good. I hope they'll let you off one day, Ken. Barbara is joining us from Buckinghamshire. Bob, now you're winning, Bob, so far. San Diego.
Oh,
Can't beat that,
San
can we?
Diego.
It's pretty good. Adrian's in
That's pretty
London.
good.
I'm in Dorset. Obviously, I don't get to
Yeah.
take this bookshelf with me everywhere. Um, Colin is looking forward to it. We don't know where he is, but that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Cotswolds.
Yeah. Ah,
Fiona.
yes, Fiona. Hi, Fiona.
Fiona. Who else have we got?
Kevin.
Surrey,
Gosh,
Kevin, hello. God, there's quite a lot of you here. I'm going to be here all night just doing this.
God,
Chester,
well, it cost me quite a bit to get them to come.
yeah. Chester, old Chester. I love Chester. Um,
Beautiful. Mm.
yeah. Kent. Oh, Somerset.
Pamela. Hi,
Oh,
Pamela.
oh, we've got a late show here, Adrian. We've got yeah. Just keep waving.
Yeah.
It's like the royal wave, isn't it? Colorado and San Diego
Excellent.
are winning
Colorado.
the glamour stakes, aren't they, tonight?
Fantastic. Yeah, that's
And
impressive. Yeah.
but there's loads of
Oh,
you. Fantastic.
yeah. Right. Blimey.
Right.
Better get
Great to
on with
see
it.
so many of you. We better get on with it because we've got way too many pictures, which is mostly
Yeah.
my fault. So let's get into it, Adrian. All right.
Okay. All right. Go for it.
As I've said, we are going to cover a variety of things and places and black and white and colour, but we're going to start in London because Adrian actually runs a couple of one-day workshops in London, and I'll furnish you with a bit more details and I'll have the little stream going across the bottom. Now, it so happens that these are sold out because they sell out. Because Adrian obviously has people from all over the place. We've got Colorado, we've got Isle of Sheppey. I mean, they're coming from all angles.
Yeah.
But we're going to use these, Adrian, aren't we, just to talk about black and white in the city, I suppose, and also the contrast perhaps between. I know you're a huge fan of sort of brutalism, urban decay,
Concrete.
as well as obviously, more modern shapes. So it may be that I walk through a few while we talk about them.
Sure.
But maybe you should start off by kind of explaining a bit of that background with why you love shooting in these sorts of locations and what you're looking for to get across these sorts of images.
Well, this is a great place to start. Actually, Lloyd's building. It was probably one of the first buildings that really caught my attention and made me realise that buildings were something beautiful to photograph. I was doing City and Guilds photography many years ago, and was doing a buildings module, which I just thought would be bricks and mortar and would be quite boring. And then somebody said to me, "Oh, you need to go to the Barbican," and this was maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and I went to the Barbican with my camera, and I was blown away. I thought, wow, this is not what I had really thought about as buildings at all. They were very unusual, very modern, quite dark and dingy in many respects, but actually really moody, and I love that. And then I wandered around a little bit around London, and the Lloyd's building, I think, still is the best of the bunch. It's been eclipsed in terms of being surrounded by all of these modern, newer architectural constructions, the cheese graters and the tin ham and all this stuff, the gherkin and all that. But the reality is, I think this building is the best for me. The way that it's constructed, that kind of inside-out mentality, the shiny stainless steel surfaces that reflect light from every angle all the time, compared to some of the other surfaces that you see around in that area, it just stands out. It's just dwarfed. All of the other buildings are so much higher. So in the city of London now, we have some really beautiful examples of modern architecture, lots of different styles, and I particularly think it works well as a black and white subject. Leading lines, patterns, contrast, moody skies as well, we regularly get. So it's I think it's just a great subject to shoot, and it's become probably my favorite thing to do. So I know that's one of those questions you ask people, say, well, if you could be anywhere in the world with your camera, where would you be? And some people say, on a beach, up a mountain, or whatever. I'd probably say pottering around a city somewhere. Actually, that would work for me. I'd go to the beach as well, but that wouldn't be for the photography pats in the same way.
No. Well, the good news for you is you've got 2 days in September doing this, Adrian. But as we mentioned, they are sold out, I'm afraid, everyone. But Adrian does tend to run these annually.
In fact, possibly biannually as well. So we typically try and do it twice a year. And, occasionally there are people can't make it for some reason or other. So it's always worth popping your name on a wait list if you're really keen and it's currently full.
Yeah. Adrian, I should just ask then, actually, and by the way, sorry, Lynn in New Zealand, you are now winning the most glamorous place to watch from. And that literally can't be beat unless someone dials in from the moon. We should just point out, and then before we get into this image, Adrian, you run 2 black and white London one-day workshops. So we should just say there's 2. And they're usually sort of one day or next to the other, or a couple of days apart.
They are.
Do you want to just explain briefly the difference in the focus on those 2 days?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 2. One of them is called Black and White in the City, and it was originally one that I did with Paul Sanders. And the idea was to kind of introduce people to the idea of black and white in a city location. So we go to a number of different spots around the river, so north and south of the river, which has a variety of different subject matter. So the idea is that you can kind of try each of those different styles, if you like, in black and white over a single day. So it's ideal for people who've never shot in black and white before. We'll set your camera to black and white, so you see everything in black and white, and then we go from there. I also show processing examples and how we might work with those images afterwards, and then there's a kind of follow-up a couple of weeks later for a half day where we share the images that you shot, and I'll show examples of the processing. So it's quite a nice combination of shooting and processing. And we do them as 2 one-day workshops, because the second one is quite often, actually, I get people who do both days, which is absolutely fine. The second one is much more focused on, it starts at the Barbican, goes through the modern buildings in the financial sector, ends up at the Tate Modern. So that one's much more focused on specifically modern and brutal, and not so much people. And obviously, you know, like Land, we've got some really great people to do street shooting and so on now, Mark and Flavio. So mine are more biased towards the less people oriented, but there will be people around. So if you want to do some street shooting, that's fine, but probably we'll focus mostly on the building's architectural features and so on.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned a couple of things I just wanted to pick on, and we've got a good number of pictures tonight, so we're not necessarily going to linger on each one. We may come backwards and forwards if each of us want to pull a point out or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But you mentioned about setting the camera into black and white, and obviously now with most people, I would imagine you see this now, most people are on mirrorless, aren't they? And or they might, well, two things here. This would also be a good day if you want to use your phone, if you didn't want to carry the gear around with you and or use your phone as well. But those people still on DSLRs, that's a little harder, isn't it? You can't see that black and white in the viewfinder, for example.
Yeah, you have a live view mode, usually. I know there are some even older cameras that probably don't support that, but I'm guessing there are not so many of those around now. But in the live view, you can set up the back, the screen on the back of the camera to show the image in black and white. Sorry if you can hear the ambulance going past, or this fire engine or whatever it is.
Dangers of recording from London, yeah.
I think it's the Photoshop police.
Yeah.
I did a content-aware fill in Lightroom earlier, and I think I got away with it. But they might be chasing me down. So if you change the camera so that what you see is black and white, you'll respond differently to what's in front of you. Yeah. And that's mostly because our eyes are heavily tuned to color, and in particular color contrast. So what we'll do is we'll see contrast in the scene as a consequence of colors being different, if you like. So the contrast between colors. When you take the color away, very often the contrast actually isn't there. So the luminance contrast, the difference between light and darks, is much more hidden in a color image. You take that away from the viewfinder, you'll find it much easier to train yourself onto the things that are going to work in black and white. So it's a simple tool just to get you to tune your eye, your vision into the things that are going to work later when we come to process.
Yeah, and I think the great thing now with those mirrorless is, like we were saying as well, is you can also simulate filter types from the old film days: reds, orange, yellows, greens, and it's great, isn't it? You can get that in the viewfinder pretty much as close towards the final product.
Yeah, so some cameras are very good at that. Some have got particular features. The Fuji cameras in particular have, Acros as a film simulation, plus various color filters that we would have manually done on our film cameras by screwing these things on the end. But yeah, and this is probably a phone shot, actually. In fact, I'm pretty certain it's a phone shot. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right, Sam. You could come and do the black and white workshops with me using your phone. You'd be not disadvantaged at all.
Yeah. I'm just going to say, because there's a couple of pictures. There's a lot of pictures tonight. There's a couple of questions coming in, which is fab, because I'm going to pick up on those. And if you are watching, wherever you may be, if you have a question, Dave's in Namibia. That's pretty special as well. If you do have a question you want to ask Adrian about either some of these locations, or about black and white, or about color when we get there, or about processing, obviously within reason of what we can cover on the evening, then do pop a question in. And I'm going to just pick up on one. This is a fairly big question, but let's just ask you and put you on the spot. Pierre, who's in Belgium. So what, according to you, most iconic buildings on the Isle of Dogs to photograph?
I mean, that was, I got a funny feeling the very first time I went there and took the main building, Canary Wharf, massive stainless steel structure. It was printed, it was darkroom back then. I printed it on a metallic paper. I think it might have been a metallic process. I can't remember exactly what it was now, but it was amazing. When you came out of the developer, you had literally silver instead of white. Now, these days, you can buy a paper like that to print on. Hannah Miller do a fabulous paper called Metallic Rag, which I absolutely love. And it's silver instead of white. So the paper itself is a silver surface. And it works brilliantly. And that image of on Canary Wharf, the main big, tall stainless steel structure that you always see on The Apprentice or whatever, that particular one just works a dream with light on it. Just like the Lloyd's building does, it reflects the light. It's a really powerful way to build these buildings. There's a lot of other buildings around in that area, and that's grown quite a lot since I've been there. I haven't been back there for a while. In fact, I've got a day tomorrow. I could pop down there tomorrow and have a look around. I haven't been back for a while. But yeah, that's a very iconic one. I think there are some issues with security and being moved on. If you know, tripods are always a problem in London.
Yeah, I was going to ask
but if you're
about
able
that.
to, if you're able to shoot handheld, which I typically do, if you're looking for long exposures, obviously that's an issue. But typically, I tend to be quite reactive, and I tend to don't carry a tripod, but I'll shoot handheld. And so there's some techniques that we learn on the 2 days that we do in London, which I teach to help solve the problems you have when you're hand holding.
Yeah. Colin's given you a very nice vote of thanks there. And so I was also going to say, Adrian, about hand holding. Without going into detail here, what's your common walk around setup? Are you in aperture priority with like a flexible ISO?
I am.
Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, everybody to their own technique, really. For me, what I like to do is aperture priority. I get the camera to do some of the work for me with aperture priority, and then I'm riding the compensation dial. So I'm increasing or decreasing the exposure real time, if you like, in reaction to the histogram. So on my camera, I'm able to have a full screen view with no clutter, but a little histogram in the bottom right. That's one of the views that I can have. So that's my standard view, and I am literally riding that dial to keep the histogram where I want it. So that's my sort of natural way of working. I have a variable ISO, so I let the camera float, if you like, because what I'm wanting to do is to capture a sharp image. And the best way to capture a sharp image is to make sure you don't accidentally use a low shutter speed when you didn't intend to. So I get the camera to do as much of that work for me as I can. Yeah. Typically, I'm working aperture priority because I'm making a decision about depth of field. So I'm driving the depth of field decision. Actually, probably 90% of my pictures are wide open, which is contrary to what most people would do for landscape. Landscape, you're always trying to maximize the depth of field. For when I'm out shooting, I'm usually trying to find a subject. I'm usually trying to emphasize that subject by minimizing depth of field. So even in this picture here, whilst it would certainly work to have full depth of field, and if I can tell that this looks sharp throughout, that's probably why that's a phone shot.
Phone shot, yeah.
You know, depth of field is like infinite. So if I was taking that with a different lens or a different camera, I might choose to take an element of that and make that sharp and actually defocus some of the rest of it. That's commonly one of the not tricks, but one of the things I like to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to just ask a couple of other questions and then we might just move on because I'm conscious of the time. Pierre again, and I'm going to get to a couple of the others. During your workshop, do you give some explanation on working with luminosity masks in black and white?
Quite possibly. So in the processing section that we do, what I get people to do is to send me 2 pictures that they were happy with, that they processed and were happy with, and I get them to send me 1 picture that they struggled with. And then what I do is I use those pictures they struggled with, and I will go through a processing session on them. Typically, I won't rehearse that, so I'll do that live. So I'll pick the picture and then I'll go through the process that I would normally do. Luminosity mask might well be something that would be appropriate for some of those images. So it'll depend on what comes in, if you like, as to what I end up doing. And it's very much a sort of reaction to the photograph and see how I might go about it. And it would be very much my personal interpretation. I wouldn't be you must do this, but I would hope to demonstrate a range of possible options and give people more choices for their own developing.
Yeah, for the artistic development. Just picking up on a couple more questions and then we'll move on. Tony, can't see an
Hmm.
obvious way to set my iPhone to black and white only. Do you use an app or a different phone? Well, depends
Nope,
what you're
it's
on,
been there for a
Tony.
long
But
time.
yeah,
Yeah, well, even my oldest iPhone 5 or whatever it was, it's been there forever. So in the phone app itself, or not in the phone app itself, yeah, the main phone
camera sort of thing. Yeah.
camera. Just open the camera application, and at the top you'll see a little chevron. You click the little chevron, it'll open a little menu at the bottom underneath the pictures, and you can slide that along, and you'll see one of those is like 3 intersecting circles, which means filter. Tap that, and then you can select from a range of different filters. Then press the little chevron at the top for that to go away, and then you're into black and white. So for me, if I just do that on, just do that for here, black and white. There we go. So I'm in now my favorite black and white mode. Ooh, weird.
There he is. He's reproduced on the internet. Okay, hope that helps, Tony. It may depend on your gear. A couple of quick questions about security, and then we're going to move on. Well, not questions, comments, really. Dave, he had a bit of trouble at Canary Wharf.
Yeah,
mobiles are okay.
I agree, Dave. I think you're absolutely right. I haven't been there, and actually, it reminds me, I did have some issues there myself a long time ago, and I hadn't consciously not gone back there, but it's interesting to hear that Dave has said it's still an issue there. So.
Yeah, so maybe a good one for the phone. And Ken was at Battersea, and the cameras were welcome. Security gauge pointers for historical. Blimey,
isn't that strange? I was there just before it opened, and they told us to go away. I managed to get enough shots in before they did that. But, I guess it depends. Depends on the individual. Depends on the security guards. Down at on the South Bank, where the crash helmet is, that area there is quite well marshaled, but they are very polite in my experience. They'll come and tap you on the shoulder, say, "What's the photography for?" If you say it's personal photography, they usually say, "Don't take pictures of people coming and going from the buildings, otherwise you're fine." And I've never had a problem there, but they're usually very quick and they'll spot you. If you put a tripod down, they'll be on you in no time, and generally that's not a good idea.
That's not good. No. I just wanted to stick this one in because there's some beautiful details stuff, and we'll pick up maybe on that theme as we go, because I'm just a bit conscious of the time.
Yeah.
Adrian, but
this one is a really good example, actually, Sam, if I don't mind be butting in.
No.
This will be another phone shot, probably. When you saw this, though, this was a super bright day, and I was there with a couple of groups over a couple of days. It was super bright. There's some beautiful twisted stainless steel right opposite the monument, or right adjacent to the monument. To the naked eye, it does not look like this. It looks super bright and blown out, even to the naked eye. But if you train your camera on it and underexpose massively so that you don't blow out the very brightest bits, and the point with these twists is there is a very bright patch at points throughout them. If you make sure you don't blow that out when you come to process, you can get an amazing result, which is so this is a good example of really taking careful control. If you point your DSLR or your phone at this, it wouldn't take a shot like that, and as likely as it will damage the brightest parts. So you really got to take control.
Yeah, don't lose those highlights, everybody. All right, cool. Let's move. Bit of a change in tack. And by the way, thank you, everyone. Fantastic to see so many of you on and giving us questions, and it's fab. All right, so keep up the good work. We are going to Heartland because this is an area you know very well, and I know you're very fond of it for various reasons. It's coastal, but there's more to it as well. And we're going to talk about some colour, Adrian. Colour. Were you all right? Did you feel all right these days?
I put a colour shirt on, look, over my black t-shirt. Got colourful decoration. I don't know what came over me. Yes, one of our lovely lighter known clients down here on the Heartland coast. So it's called the Wreckers Coast for good reason. It's I think it's something like 160 shipwrecks in this relatively short section of the coastline. Very dramatic, can be very dramatic seas. And we do it's 5 days, 4 nights, or 4 nights. Yeah, 5 days, 4 nights. I think that's right. So Monday to Friday. It's a capture to print. So as I love to do capture to prints. To me and to many other photographers, until it comes out of the printer, you haven't finished. You know, it's still waiting to be finished, and the feeling of the print itself is really important. So you can't really, I don't think you can really convey an image easily in a digital form. It needs to come out on paper. So we were there shooting some, as we can see here, some long exposures in this case, and it's set on in December, typically to get some good weather, and that's what we're looking for. It's an unusual one. It's a small one. We only have 4 people on it, and you need good legs though. We don't use any vans or cars or anything. We just we pitch up at the hotel, and after that 5 days is just pottering around along the coastline, up and down from the hotel. And it has great potential, as you can see here. I think that's another phone shot out on the cliffs. But yeah, it's a big dramatic skies and lots of crashing waves if the weather is rough. But actually, there's an awful lot of beautiful detail as well. There's a number of small and some quite big waterfalls in that area, both north and south of where we'll be staying. So depending on the group and the group dynamic, we need to match what we do to that group. I would say it's strenuous though, because even the climb out of the hotel up onto the cliff can be too much for some. So
short and sharp.
Yeah, it kind of you need to have a reasonable fitness to do it. But then we mix up editing and printing with the outings for the day. So it depends, I say, on the group. In groups, some groups I've done half day out, half day in. So for each of the days, so you go out in the morning perhaps and collect images, come back, have a look at editing them, then processing and print, and do that every day. So that's quite a nice way to work. Others do maybe more time out during the first few days and then come back and Kevin, and come back and print maybe on the last day, spend the whole day editing and printing on the last day. So we can mix and match because it's a small group. So it's,
and condition wise, it gives you that flexibility, doesn't it? If it's pouring down or if it's all cracking off and everyone's got the vibe still, you can stay out and shoot. And that's the glory of those multi-day tours is you can really do that. And like Adrian says, 4 people, that's fantastic. That's such a nice small group.
It is amazing to do. So it's total immersion.
Totally, not in the water. That's a different thing. That's if you don't edit like Adrian tells you. No. One wider point to light and land, I'll just point. Adrian mentioned it's strenuous. We do grade the tours in 3 different durabilities. That's not quite right. It's been a long day, everyone. Sorry. So there's strenuous, moderate, and easy, and that do take note of that when you're looking at tours that are available, because what you don't want to be is wanting to go out and romp all across the countryside on a tour that's very much just based around 1 or 2 locations and it's an easy and we're not moving much. Okay, you'll still do lots photographically, and in the same way, you don't want to be finding yourself on a strenuous tour where there might be a few miles a day up and down, as it were. You don't want to be holding anyone back and or doing yourself any disservice, shall we say, either for you or the group, obviously. So do check those out. They're on the pages where you look at the tours. It does say it. And
you could always drop me a line, or we can have a chat if you're not sure about your fitness level for the workshop that we're doing. And you mentioned it, Sam. I think you're absolutely right. If you have, in this case, we have three fit and healthy people, and then we have somebody who doesn't really have the energy to get up and down the hills. It completely compromises the tour. So you really need to think about that carefully and check with the leaders to make sure that you're going to be okay.
And there's a good number of things available for you to choose from. So I just want to obviously we've been flicking through a few of these color. Obviously there's the coastal stuff, and what we've been doing through my beautiful editing and curating is we've been sort of slowly coming smaller and smaller on our vistas here. Obviously we're starting with the big views, and I think one thing that I know you enjoy and I think this coast is really, really great for is that you can work on those wider scales and on the detail shots like this as well, can't you? And so therefore whatever the conditions, you've got stuff to play with.
Absolutely. So there's, and then on this particular tour, it's really good. The hotel's right on the beach pretty much. And so if it's pouring down with rain, there's always going to be like this break. There'll be a break, you nip out for 5 minutes, you can take shots like that. And then, go back to the bar, of course. But there's plenty of option to play with the weather. You can come and go. So that's really, really nice. No driving or anything to get to locations. So that's really good. The rocks in this area particularly show the colours are quite spectacular. Some of the areas have a really strong metallic seams going through, so you have these rich oranges and reds, really beautiful colors actually, which come from a lot of the cliffs and so on, which are eroding, and bits of it are collapsing. It exposes new material all the time. So there's, if you wanted to, if you're into making books, for example, you could make a whole book just on the colors of the stones that are scattered around or in the walls, in the cliff walls, without doing a single vista.
Yeah, and these are very similar to what you find in Bude and that area, aren't they, in Cornwall? And it goes all down that coast, and such a variation there. It's really a beautiful part of the world. We wanted to just include this sort of still behind the scenes shot, because you mentioned at the beginning this is a capture to print. So obviously the processing and the printing is a big part of it. Do you find, Adrian, that sometimes people come on these workshops who maybe are less experienced with printing or don't have their own printers at home? And I would imagine, I know, having done similar things, when you actually see someone get it, and the fact you're still on the location where you may have shot it the morning before or whatever, that's a cool thing, isn't it?
Oh, I think so. And that's one of the things I particularly like about capture to print. We'll do, so in this particular example here, this might have been part way through the workshop, and we'll, as you say, can literally go straight back out. You've got a small group. Those people will have different styles and will have different likes. And what happens is, a picture will come out of the printer. Somebody go, wow, I really like that. I'd like to go and do that myself. They can go off and have their own take on perhaps an idea that they found through seeing someone else's work. So it is a very nice way to work, and the ability to revisit over and over the space that you're in allows you to get a much deeper connection with it. And sort of tune in to the things that work for you visually, and allow you to sort of home your ideas and go back and repeat something if it didn't quite work.
Yeah, and I can see even just from this little example, there's some beautiful detail things, wider things, black and white, colour. There's all manner of stuff. So Adrian will always work with whatever your vibe is, and that group way of looking at things is really cool as well. I'm going to just pick on a couple of questions, Adrian. This is what have been coming in while we've been talking. David asked a question about lenses and buildings. I'm going to come back to that, David, when we're in Prague, because we're going to see a little bit of architectural stuff there, so it might make a bit more sense for me to ask that there. And Phil has asked if there's a particular app, I'm sure there may be a couple, but app you would recommend on an iPhone for improved setting control, as taking control of it more manually.
When I first really got into using the phone for photography, was the iPhone 11. It didn't have the raw file support within the Apple's own camera app, so I did have a good hunt around, and I found a number that I got on okay with. And what I would say is there are a lot of them out there, and to some extent it depends on your particular style which one you connect with. The one I particularly connected with was one called ProCam, in particular because it had a way of shooting not just raw files but being able to do automatic bracket exposures and things like that, which was for me something that gave me a wider dynamic range, and that was lacking on that particular phone at that time, and that helped to fill that gap. In particular, Lightroom can then stitch, those HDRs essentially can create the wider dynamic range and then stitch them across multiple shots as well. So with a simple, 4 or 5 presses of a button, you can create a very big file which has a lot of detail from blacks to whites and has, a lot of resolution. So it's actually quite a simple process, handheld, to make, big, powerful images. So ProCam then went on to ProCamera. That one is probably the one I'd recommend these days. All of these apps come at £10 or something like that. Sometimes you have to add additional plugins, and I think ProCamera, I did add an HDR plugin and a exposure bracketing plugin, I think, which were a few pounds each or something like that. So if you've not got, if you don't feel you've got the control, which I agree with the built-in camera app, then something like ProCamera I'd recommend. If you want lots of different filters and film simulations, then there's one called 645 Pro, which is trying to be very much a medium format camera simulation. It has a whole load of film simulations. It has filters you can add to it and all sorts. that could be the sort of thing that if you're into that kind of thing, you might get you might connect with that better.
Cool. Adrian, one more question. Do you use any apps for long exposure effects, or do you just use the live
Yeah.
view option?
Well, both. So the built-in live option is fantastic. It's really simple, very clever. I wish digital camera manufacturers would just sort out then
Why not?
why the hell don't they do that? It's just crazy that they don't do it. So we make a long exposure by starving the sensor of light, and yeah, what a ridiculous idea. The camera, the phone people got a much better idea. Take lots of pictures and then put them together. One of the really nice things about that is the phone app does, like, it's a 2-second exposure. It doesn't matter how bright it is or how dark it is, it's 2 seconds, because the way that it puts them together ignores, you're not trying to cut light down and change the exposure. You're putting together perfect exposures and then just adding them together in time. So it's a different way of doing it. Now you can use your SLR for that. You can do something called exposure bracketing or exposure merging, if you like. So you can take multiple shots with a short shutter and then merge them together in Photoshop. So there are ways of simulating, but it could be built into the camera. Annoying that it isn't. So I do use the 2-second one, but the problem with the 2-second one is it's 2 seconds. If you want something shorter than that, then I would resort to something called slow shutter. It's called slow shutter cam originally, and I think it's now just called slow shutter. And that allows you a control from about a 1/16 of a second up to 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or bulb. So you can set the shorter shutters that provide the sort of detail. Actually, the picture you've got on screen there, the bottom black and white one on towards the left, that kind of shorter shutter. So it's an 1/8 or a 1/4 of a second. In that territory, you get to see the detail of the water, not just a sort of a blur. So that can be great for shooting waterfalls or rivers. If you're looking for, so this is quite a long shutter on this one, it's all blurred. But if you wanted to see the structure of the water, then you need to be shooting something like a 1/4 of an 1/8 of a second, somewhere around there. And you can't do that with the built-in phone app. So this shot might have been done with the built-in 2-second app. But if you use slow shutter cam, you could then change those, that get down to much smaller increments, and you'll see much more interesting structure in the water.
Yeah, cool. Well, everyone who's watching along, I've put the names of the apps in the comments. So if you missed a bit of that, or you want to just pick it up on the comments, they should be there to go back and have a look at. Obviously, don't leave us though yet, because we've still got 20 minutes or so for your viewing delectation. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this Heartland area. Then we're going to get to Prague, so bear with us for that. And then we're going to come back for a bit of a chat about a very special phone-only workshop that Adrian runs. And we're going to talk about why. Obviously, we've made the point through here that a camera is a camera, and how Adrian has rolled the mobile usage into his camera usage, traditional camera usage, whatever. And obviously, talking about these apps and things, goes to show just how versatile a shooting tool the phone can be. In fact, maybe more versatile in lots of ways than our more traditional cameras. But just before we get into that Prague stuff, Adrian, we've got a couple of images in the next sequence of 4 or 5 where there are 2 images from the same location, and I'm just going to walk through them for me. Actually, no, let's just do these first. And what I wanted to just talk to you about as a kind of wider topic is working a scene, shall we call it, where there are a million ways to skin the cat, aren't there? And sometimes we get so locked in once the tripod is out. If we're on our bigger camera, we get down, we don't move again. We've got the landscape orientation. So do you find sometimes you have to cajole people to see the same thing in different ways? And what do you think? Are there certain clues about the form of a structure or a subject which tend to lend themselves more to a particular type of interpretation? Big question.
Well, yeah. I can try and remember what you said now, but I think the idea that you put the camera on the tripod, set the tripod up, you get your filters out, and all the rest of it. That it does kind of start to tie you down to something. And then it kind of, there is a resistance, I'm sure, to then moving to a different position, a different viewpoint. And actually, this is another place that the phone comes in, because with that, say, 2-second exposure, I'll quickly be able to take different shots from different positions and see what's working, what's not working. So in this case, for example, without changing the camera's position, without moving anything, I can see how it might look in different ways from different positions. And the camera does a pretty good simulation of that. So as an aid to your normal photography, if you like, your big camera photography, the phone, I think, is a really good viewfinder. But it goes a bit further than what we used to carry around, these like literally little viewfinders with different fields of view. Yeah. And they're good because they give you the opportunity to work out how something's going to work, and you would have done that to, you know, which lens do I need to get out of the bag, all of that stuff. The phone is taking that role completely now. So I use it. One of the things I really love is a super wide lens, and I use that as a way of making a more minimal shot. And the 0.5 on the iPhone is basically a 13mm, and I have a 12mm on my camera. So that view is an unusual view, and it can be quite difficult to work out where to place yourself. Get your phone out, skirt around, see what's working, what's not working, find the position, set your camera up, and then you can take that shot, and it reduces the uncertainty and the reluctance to move. I think when you know it's going to work from another position, then you get, yeah, no problem, pick up your tripod, move it, orient it. Also, the phone tends to push you down the portrait route, and I really love portrait formats. In this case, we've got a landscape shot here, but the other one I think is rotated through to portrait. Actually, the portrait often works really well with landscape images, because you get a much deeper sense within the image that what's going on at the bottom of the frame is much closer to you, and you can get the sky in as well. So it actually allows you to deliver a bigger journey through the picture by having that orientation. And the phone, because it's naturally that way around, kind of rather cleverly nudges you to say, oh, well, look, you know, this works. So whilst I do rotate my camera, my phone to horizontal as well, actually very often I'm very comfortable with the portrait format. And so that would help me see that, you know, lends itself to this particular type of view, actually.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the more you take, you know, in the location, you can see it with more discernment back on the big screen at home, and you know, so it's good to have some options of different orientations and things like that, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
To see those details. We're going to come back to that theme in just a moment. But this is maybe talking about that wider angle. I mean, it's you know, we have this feeling of distance in a way, don't we, coming towards us?
Yeah.
So, do you find with those wider angles, you can, you know, it's more of a particular look, isn't it? You know what I mean? But they do really lend themselves to that.
Yeah. Well, there's two particular uses I make of the super wide. In the city, you're right up against the buildings. You can't go back. You can't get space between you and the object you're trying to shoot. Your 24mm lens is not wide enough to get the building in. So actually, in that respect, the super wide angle lens is designed for that environment. It was originally really used for internal pictures of internal spaces, so rooms, and you know, that you had to have something wide enough to be able to get the two walls in either side, that you're stuck in the corner to try to squeeze all of this space into your camera. So those super wides, I use them for the city to get more in, but also in the landscape actually to minimize detail. So it's a way, I use it as a way of kind of reducing the size and the impact of some of the image that I'm capturing. So it is a sort of conscious effort to do that for me. I like blocking up my shadows. I like getting rid of the rather nice textures. I like getting rid of all of that stuff when I'm processing, because it's distracting. You know, I want to bring your eye to a particular point and then set it against some contrast. So I'll use that extra space that I've generated. Quite often it will be quite dark extra space, and it kind of sets, it gives the main subject, if you like, a bigger, broader canvas to work on.
Yeah. Cool. There's a few phone related questions coming in, and what I might do at the end is we'll do a quick fire through those depending on time.
Okay.
Just so we can keep ourselves rolling. Now, just a very quick one here, and we'll just do a minute or two on this, Adrian, about, again, reinterpreting or different interpretations of a similar situation or a similar location, I should say, because we are off the same sort of headland here, aren't we? Looking at a similar thing. But obviously we've used, or you've used, or we haven't, you have, used both light as a large space in this image, and indeed the power of dark maybe to fill a similar space, and those two things give you quite a different mood in terms of openness or in terms of deep oppression, whatever it might be. So what I wanted to say here is, do you feel sometimes that your mood at the time of shooting determines this, or is it more your interpretation at the time of editing? So it's the shooting is more the capturing of the data, and the editing is really where the mood is coming in, or vice versa. Because Paul, we talked about Paul. He might work differently on this to you or to I.
Yeah. I'm sure he will. It is a really interesting question. I'd say both. Not to hedge my bets, but or sit on the fence. And here's the reason why. When I'm stood there, I am looking through the viewfinder in black and white. So whilst it's not processed, it does at least have the tonality. Typically, it might be a bit brighter through the viewfinder though, because I'll have been working with the histogram to make sure that my whites are white, etc. So what I'm seeing through the viewfinder is the beginning of the process. In my head, I'm thinking, right, I'm going to darken all of this down. I'll add some dehaze in the sky, of course, all of that stuff. In my mind, I've already processed it. Then I get back and, stuff happens and I don't do anything with those pictures. Maybe I'll come back and have a look at them in a few weeks' time. And if you're Rachel, for example, Rachel Talibart, she'd come back in a year's time. So the moment when you took it has gone. So when you then see it again to process it, you're almost like you're going through that process a second time, and you could easily go in a completely different direction. You may not remember exactly what you had in your mind when you took it at that time. I'll have an aesthetic, I'll have an idea, I have my own experiences, and I have a particular look that I like. So that will generally head me in a particular direction. But what typically happens for me is the processing part is where I have fun. The processing part is what I really enjoy. And very different to quite a lot of other photographers I hear speak who say, I don't want to do anything to my pictures. I spend as little time as possible. So I try to get them right in camera. I would say in black and white, you cannot get them right in camera. You cannot finish them in camera. You can only start them in camera. You have to finish them in the darkroom. And that's what we use these days. So with black and white images, typically I'll go through quite an exploration of that image some point later, and it may go in a different direction to the original intent. I'll try high and low key. I'll perhaps pull a little part of the image out and make that the entire image. There's often things that come out during the processing that I'll spot a small feature and the feature becomes the picture. Now it'll either stay in situ and I'll darken everything else down, or I'll minimize the effect of everything else and feature it, or I'll crop it and just take that element out and then make a picture from that. So I think it is in both cases. You're thinking about it as you're taking it, but you often get a completely different and separate go at it again when you actually come to process. And for me, to say the processing is where the fun is, the processing is where the art is. I think the processing can take it in multiple directions, and I wouldn't second guess it. I think I would just have fun. I usually go wacky. I usually go extreme, because when you go to extremes, you see things. And those things often then lead to the processing options that may not have been obvious when you stood there.
Yeah, cool. No, it's really interesting, and two different ways to interpret this location, and obviously conditions may have been different days, and maybe the same day. Who knows? But we all see things very differently. The last sort of thing I want to touch on with Heartland, and we in theory we've got 10 more minutes. We may run a little bit longer than that if Adrian lets me.
Yeah, sure.
But I will try and keep us rolling. I just wanted to put this out because there's 2 or 3 images you have like this, which I really, really love. It's right up my street, as you well know. And I wanted to make the point really that although we've been talking a bit about coastal stuff in this area, and just to recap everyone, we're talking about, this is North Devon where Adrian runs a tour for a multi-day tour. There are also these beautiful inner landscape moments, abstract extracts, whatever you want to call them, with passing light in the winter. It can be a great time to work on these as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, this could be your back garden. Who knows where this could be? It could be anywhere. Happens to be on a windswept section of the cliffs, but it could be anywhere, and it's all about the light and nothing else. The shape of the grass. And those are beautiful moments. I would say I'm quite a reactive photographer. I'm not, therefore I'm not very thoughtful. I go.
You're working with what's there.
Yeah. Something happens, bang. I'll try and grab that moment. So, and that's why I tend to prefer to work handheld. I tend to optimize my workflow to work for me handheld, and I pretty much reserve the tripod for long exposure type settings rather than the more thoughtful photography, which I know lots of people do that, and I absolutely admire the work that those people do. I can't do that. It's just not in my nature to work that way. Yeah. So it took me a long time to discover that. I'm much happier, much more comfortable when I'm just taking in the environment, see what's happening, and then grab those moments. These are moments that happen at your feet, and you have to be quick, and you need to grab them when they happen. But it's part of the coastline. It happens to be, but it could be anywhere. And I'm in London now, right opposite petrol station, which is a lovely view. But I know that if I took my camera out and wandered about, I would snap at lots of little things, and they may or may not turn into something. But I collect that stuff. I collect these little snippets, and sometimes there are gems in there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a tripod shot.
Having said led you right into
all of that. Well done, Sam. Yeah. So this is avoiding Prague, being run over. Trying to. Yeah, this is and unusual for me, high key, and it as a night scene. When you see the original of this, it's basically pretty much black with bright spotlights, and looks very unpromising as a high key image from the outset, but it just beautifully works as a high key, I think, and processes reasonably easily into high key as well. So I was impressed with that. So actually a lot of night photography might well be great candidates for high key. If you think about it, they're probably mostly low contrast with highlights, and depending on how you process that might actually process better than a sunny day, where you might have a lot more contrast and a lot more shadows to deal with. And this is actually mostly quite flat light.
Yeah, so we were going to touch, there's just a small number of images here from Prague. Adrian is running this in September. This particular tour is sold out, but it will come back on the calendar. So yes, you absolutely. Might not go on this one, but it would be something maybe for the year after. So just maybe while I cycle through a couple of these, Adrian, in the background, why Prague, and what is it that catches you about shooting there as a place?
Yeah, I mean, a great question. Prague, Paris, Berlin, London, these are I see them as black and white cities. I don't know why. It may be just my imagination. I mean, Berlin, of course, it's black and white, right? It's war movies. It's it's not Get Carter, but it's
as well. But...
spy movies. It's all in black and white. In my head, it's in black and white. Some of these films I've watched, they're actually in color, but I remember them as black and white. So it's because of the nature of the kind of noir setting. Prague has that kind of feel to me. It had that feel to me when I first visited it. It works beautifully in color, but I think it has real beauty in the black and white nature as well. There's a lot to be captured. This is, again, it's all about the light picking up on reflections, the beautiful window. This is in the Spanish synagogue, and so was the previous one. I just really felt it was an interesting city. It had a mixture of modern and ancient works here. Department store here. I absolutely love this building. It's one of my favorite pictures from Prague. Not to everybody's taste, I'm sure, but so it has quite a variety of subject matter. It wasn't bombed in the war. The Germans occupied it, and it actually stayed relatively unscathed. So there's a lot of older buildings there, and very very dramatic older buildings as well, quite Gothic in nature. So, and then you have some modern stuff like this, which, yeah, I think the harsh, aggressive black and white treatment for me feels quite nice as an option. So yeah, and again, wide angle. This is probably my 12mm, probably almost in touching distance of that concrete post.
It's such a city of contrast as well, isn't it? You know, from the central area, you know, to outside in the suburbs. And we've got a couple of broader views here as well, which I'll just go through, because it's nice, isn't it, sometimes to actually look back to the city, because sometimes we get sort of locked in the streets and the architecture is right in front of us and all the rest of it. But Prague, like Paris, maybe the beautiful bridges, you've got these types of gorgeous views if the conditions are nice and a bit of mist or soft light or whatever it might be.
Yeah, the bridges are a real feature of Prague. So I think there's 7 crossing. You can actually almost get all of them in a single shot if you're really super wide. You can just about manage that. It sort of curves around. It's quite a nice compact city. It's one of the attractions. Paris, however, is a bit more spread out. I think anybody that's walked a lot of Paris will know it's a long way between bits in some cases, where Prague is much more compact as a city. It has a beautiful hillside that sort of surrounds it. So you do get these lovely views. And yeah, being up onto the top, looking down over the bridges and the river. Yeah, there is a climb up to Prague Castle, which some people find a struggle, but you get rewarded with fabulous cascading architecture and lovely views down towards the city. So I like it. It's a really interesting city. The riverside is beautiful. We came across what was it? I'm going to say aardvark, but it's not an aardvark. Koipu. A koipu down on the river, which looks like a huge rat. It frightened the life out of me when I first saw it. Great big fangs. I thought it was this massive rat, but it turns out it's a koipu, and they are around in these areas. And shocking. And it literally just kind of crawled along in front whilst I was taking the picture. But yeah, so this contrast of the Charles Bridge in the background, I think, classic, very old bridge, one of the original crossings, and you will often see a well-known view, which is a misty bridge with the towers, and something that's commonly shot. We may or may not get the opportunity to do that. The mist is unpredictable. September is a possibility.
What do you mean unpredictable? You got to take it with you. Just a quick question here from LE. Do you include post-processing in the Prague tour brackets or afterwards?
Yeah, so it's a little bit trickier to do printing. So I won't take a printer out with me, but we definitely would talk about processing, and I will always have a laptop kicking around, so we'll be able to sample a few pictures. So there'll be a kind of more informal, maybe cafe stops, and doing a little bit of processing, especially if the weather is a bit less kind to us, then that's an obvious way to do that. But it is tricky when you go on trips further away, then it's, that getting that balance between using the time to see the location versus doing things that you might be able to do online or back at base. It is a bit of a balance, but I know that the processing is really important. So I will always make time to help people with processing or give examples as we go. So on Prague, there's not like a half day or anything of formal teaching on that, but there will be time that we'll use during the tour.
Yeah, built in. Great. Thank you. There's a few other little tech questions, which I'm going to get to at the end. We're going to do a quick fire through at the end, and also one about IR, and we'll come back to that as well. We just want to do 5 minutes about this particular tour, which Adrian is doing, which is landscape photography using your phone. Now, obviously, we've talked a lot about phones tonight. We've talked a lot about different locations, black and white color. And Adrian has put all of this into one workshop, which is a multi-day just using your phone. Now, 5 or maybe certainly 8 years ago, he would have probably been led to the funny farm for suggesting such an idea. And we can all argue whether he should still be in the funny farm. But it's absolutely a really cool thing. When I saw it come up on the list, I thought, oh, fantastic. Of course, it makes sense. It's a really cool thing to do. So tell us a bit about it, Adrian, as I scroll through some of the pics.
Well, obviously, we've been talking about phones, and they're not a cheap camera. It's like £1,000 camera. It should be a good camera, and it is a good camera. And we did. I think I was tossing around some ideas with Paul Sanders about this doing something more than a one day with the phones and treating it like a proper camera. So what would you do? You would go on a workshop for a multi-day with it, wouldn't you? That's what you'd do. And you'd print from it as well, wouldn't you? So it's a capture to print workshop. We will do printing on the last day, editing and printing on the last day. So we'll cover all the things that matter. And I sort of posed it more as a question: is it possible to use your phone instead of your big camera and take it away and create good images and also prints from it? So, and in many ways it's for you to answer that as part of the workshop, but we'll go to various different places that we would typically go with our normal kit. But the difference here is you won't have a rucksack, you won't have a tripod, you'll have your phone in your pocket, and it's an amazingly free feeling.
Liberating, yes.
It is absolutely liberating. What was shocking when Paul and I did it for the first time was on the printing day, we looked around the room, there's like 30 or 40 prints around the room. And I said to Paul, this is just like an ordinary capture to print workshop.
Yeah.
The prints, you couldn't tell the difference. And it was shockingly good. It was even more surprising to us, I think, when we did it for the first time. And then since then, I've been, obviously Paul has left, and since then I've been running the workshop myself with a smaller group, and it's fabulous. So yeah, this is a phone shot, a single phone shot, which I would be pretty happy with if I'd taken that with any other camera, and it prints beautifully. So we say, okay, your phone is a camera like any other camera, make a workshop like any other workshop, but the bias will be towards helping you to get the camera, get the features and the settings and the use of it to a point where you'll be confident to use it. It's never intended to be a replacement. The phone, I think, is a complement to your main camera, if you like. They're getting better all the time, though, and at some point, I think you might stop taking a big camera out, except on special occasions. I think that is genuinely going to happen probably sooner than we're all expecting. In the meantime, make good use of the camera you have got. It's a great camera, and the best way to do that will be to sort of focus on that as the only tool in your kit. And then we'll try different types of shots. So here, sort of more macro type shots, the river shots, the sort of slow water shots, typical traditional wide vistas, all the kind of things you might normally do, but let's do it on your phone instead, and look at the techniques you might need, maybe the strengths and weaknesses of your phone compared to your traditional camera. And that's the idea of the workshop. It's proven to be a pretty successful formula. It's been very good as a workshop, and continues to be. So we've got one running in, is it March next year? Yeah, March next year.
Yeah. So just as a kind of wrap up on that, there's been a lot of questions about the phone stuff, and I think a lot of people out there still maybe haven't unlocked the power that they have in their phone that they're carrying around every day. And I guess we use the standard camera app, whatever the phone is. But there are so many tools, as we've touched on a couple of the apps that Adrian uses, and the ability to do that in field with someone who's been doing this for years and is an expert in using the phone for these situations. I think that's really neat. And so 4th to the 7th of March, you could join Adrian, and that is in the North Devon area, covering a variety of shooting opportunities. And just imagine that, Adrian, phone only, walking up a hill or around the coastline. Oh my Lord, it's easy. It's lovely. You should all be doing it. So what we're going to do, everyone, thank you so very much for all your input throughout the evening, everyone who's left a comment or made a note. There were a number of questions, and I'm going to just go bang, 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 rapid fire, Adrian. So super quick answers, okay.
Right.
And if you've asked a question, I'll try and get to it now. Final other thing I'd say is if you've liked what we've done, please hit the like button on either Facebook or YouTube, and then we may well get some extra viewers and all the rest of it. So first quick fire question. I'm in the market for a new second-hand iPhone. Which one would you recommend?
So iPhone 12 on has Pro RAW. That's quite an important step. Nothing wrong with iPhone 11. I had one of those and made some big prints with it, but the extra Pro RAW would be a good thing to do. So I'd go for a reconditioned 12.
Okie dokie. Again, if we can do this quickly, great. Maybe a dumb question, but how do you get different angles, wide, very wide, etc., on the phone when using it as an aid?
Well,
That
you've
might
got
depend.
yeah, I mean, you've got 3 or 2, depending on which model you buy. Sometimes they got 4, and each of the lenses that you see on the front is a fixed field of view. But you do have a dial that you can vary between them. The only thing I would say is I never shoot with a variable dial, because that is a combination of one of the lenses and some zoom. So it's a digital zoom always. So if you pick the 1, 2, or 3 options that you've got, the buttons, if you like, they're fixed. They're like prime lenses.
Yeah.
Shoot on that, and then you can always crop in if you need to. But yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah. Okay, that's assuming you have a fairly modern phone with a number of lenses on it.
It does assume that, yeah.
Yeah, if you don't, you're stuck to finger pinching on the zoom.
Digital zoom, yeah.
Yeah. Barbara, should I even consider changing my Canon camera and just use a phone camera?
Well, there's some people out there that did sell their big fancy cameras and bought a film camera and an every year upgrade on their phone. Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I use my big camera because I love using it. There's more to it than the picture that comes out of the back. It feels fabulous in my hand. There's something about the way the lenses work. It's a whole experience. I don't think that is going to change or go away. So I'll always want that experience. Whether I get a better picture or not than what I can get from my phone, that's debatable. And it might well be that the two will be difficult to split very soon. But for me, I would say I wouldn't sell your camera gear and buy a phone as an alternative. And if you can't afford to buy a fancy phone yet, a reconditioned earlier model is a great way to go. I think perhaps that's the way to go.
Cool. This is something we're going to get into on another day. The question
Yeah.
from Elon was, or Ellen, do you use IR much at all?
Yes.
Infrared, yes.
So I have several cameras that are converted. I'm currently having a camera converted in the US where they're taking out the color matrix itself, and that will become pure monochrome type camera, which will be infrared as well. Yes, I do. I've even shot infrared pictures with the phone using a traditional infrared filter over the front, and it works amazingly well if the light is there. It's quite a technical subject. I shoot both color and black and white in infrared, which is a bit weird. So I don't normally do color normal pictures, but in infrared it seems I'm really drawn to the color ones. So the weird stuff is just weird. I think that's why I like it. But infrared is beautiful.
We might do a whole thing on this. We did, Adrian
Yeah.
and I were talking before, we might try and squeeze in an IR session at some point. So keep your eye on the upcoming events for that.
Yeah, and there will be, I'm quite certain that there will be a workshop coming. It's just we tried to do something this year. The calendars just didn't work for us, and the hotels didn't work for us. So keep your eyes open, but there will be something coming.
Cool. Adrian, would you recommend using plugins such as Silver FX Pro to quickly run through its presets to see what works and then take it from there? We're talking about processing after the fact here.
Yeah, I think one of there are several strengths of Silver FX. I don't use it myself, but there are bits of it that I love. I love the filters in terms of toning. The way that it goes about toning and adding of grain is very darkroom and very natural, and I absolutely love it. And I wish that Lightroom worked that way. The reality is I can do everything I need to do in Lightroom, and I don't want to jump out to a plugin. If I jump out to a plugin, I end up with a big file coming back. I lose a lot of the flexibility of the non-destructive workflow. There is now a non-destructive workflow with Silver FX, but it's still a big file, and frankly, I can do everything I need. However, the presets are quite a good way to get an idea of how an image might possibly be processed. So, and I think that's what Paul is saying here. So in that respect, I would say, yeah, if you're a little bit stuck as to where to go, jump to Nick, pick a preset, or go through the presets. You might see something rather unusual, and then personally, I would be back into Lightroom and make that kind of look using the built-in Lightroom tools.
Recreate that vibe. David, I promised you we'd get to you. I said it was in Prague. I lied, but I am getting there now. For building photography, most suitable lens. You talked about a 12mm, Adrian. I know obviously it depends what you're doing, but what would you have on the majority of the time?
Personally, I love it. 24 to 105 is a great all-rounder, or 24 to 70. If you've just got one lens, that's probably a great place to start. Going wider would be my next bet.
Okay, cool. We're very nearly there. Thank you, Adrian. Sorry. Just two left. Bob, going to Cuba in March. I'm a large format photographer, but I don't think I'll take a film camera. Given I have a choice, any recommendations for a mirrorless? Something maybe neat and carryable and quick and small, Adrian?
Yeah, there's a lot of choice though. Goodness. I wouldn't even know where to start. It depends on your bias. I mean, what I carry,
you're a
I like.
Fujifilm shooter?
I'm using Sony.
Oh, you're a Sony, okay.
So I used to have Minolta. Minolta were bought by Sony. I've just stuck with that model. It works for me. Sony seem to have really done some amazing things very recently. So, if you're looking for quality, large format quality, there are a few out there. You don't have to go to a large format or a medium format digital camera. And if you're wanting movements, you can get tilt shift lens adapters and all kinds of interesting devices to add on to most cameras. I think you just have to see which one you connect with. You know, Nikon, Fuji, Canon, Sony, they are very different. The way they operate, the menu systems, the way that, you know, you're likely to connect with one of those. You need to go into a shop and try them and see which one kind of connects with you, and then go in that direction, I think.
Yeah, good advice. And or get trade shows or photography shows. They're cool. You can get your hands on a number of things in one place without upsetting the guy in the shop. And we're going to finish on this nice one. George says, not a question, just an observation. I happened to notice you had 999 subscribers, so I became the 1000th tonight. Thank you, George. P.S. Do I win a prize? No, but you win the never-ending affection of myself and Adrian, which is more prize than money could ever buy. Thank you, George. Do subscribe, everyone, if you haven't already. Obviously, now we're in 4 digits. And definitely don't unsubscribe, because that would obviously ruin George's.
We'd have to take George's prize away.
Yeah. So look, Adrian, massive thanks. We've run a little bit long, so really very kind of you to be flexible, because I know you're busy today. You've been shooting and tomorrow, so I really appreciate your time. It's been good to catch up.
That's great. The pub's still open, Sam.
The pub.
I can see it from here.
And the petrol station.
Yeah.
But great numbers tonight watching along. Really appreciate that, and obviously that's because Adrian's here. And hopefully you've enjoyed this. You've learned something. Perhaps you've been inspired by the images, inspired by the locations. We will be back every 2 weeks. We do a show. It's the new show with me in a fortnight from now. And then again, I'll be joined by an actual photographer guest, and we'll do another session like this in a month's time. So just keep your eye on the Light and Land socials, and Light and Land newsletter is where you will find all the latest news, workshops, events, and live streams, blogs, yada yada. I'm just talking now. We both want to go. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you again very soon. Goodbye.
All right. Bye-bye.